It's a rainy Thursday night here in Connecticut, and you know what? It's a perfect night to talk about Starfield. What's even better is I finally got my Barkfield shirt in. It's a shirt that has dogs instead of the people in the Starfield logo. On the bottom it says Barkfield, and it was actually a charity shirt, so proceeds from purchasing the shirt went to a animal shelter in Dallas, I believe. I think it was actually a QuakeCon thing, and actually I'll show a picture of the shirt on the screen. It's kind of hard to see the whole shirt, especially with my beard, and it's kind of out of frame here, and even if I stand up, it'll cut some of the shirt off, so I'll put that picture on the screen so you can see that whole shirt. But now that you've seen that, let's get to Starfield. Todd Howard did a Q&A video on the Bethesda YouTube channel. He went over some new details for Starfield, and it's pretty awesome. Talked about new dialogue options, a kind of a persuasion mini game that's kind of not really a mini game, but it's kind of built into the dialogue. Talked about traits and actually an option for removing traits if you started a character and you decide that you no longer want that trait. And speaking of traits, there was a trait that was kind of shown off really briefly in the video that wasn't mentioned by Todd Howard specifically. It's kind of a throwback to an old Oblivion thing, so make sure to watch to the end of the video to check that out. Right in the very beginning, Todd Howard talked about some games that gave him some inspiration for Starfield and kind of the things that led them towards making the game more of a hard science fiction kind of game instead of kind of like a science fiction kind of game. Hard science fiction meaning more like things that are plausible scientifically but not necessarily 100% true to science, but more based in actual real life science. He mentioned actually having read like physics papers and things like that just to get a good idea of how the spaceship should function and things like that. Talked about fuel for the ship and how originally the ships had a certain amount of fuel, so that if you were flying around and you ran out of fuel, you would be kind of shit out of luck, essentially. I mean, it's not like running out of gas on the side of a road where you can actually get out and push, you know? I mean, you're out in space. So in that kind of sense, they were saying the game kind of just stops if you run out of fuel. And so instead they went a different way. They went a way to, as far as however you decide to customize your ship, the amount of fuel and the engines of the ship and things like that give you a basic like how far you can travel. So you wouldn't be able to set your destination to a planet that's that like a certain distance away. You might have to do kind of like a planet hopping kind of thing. So instead of running out of fuel in the middle of space and then you're just kind of dead, you actually don't have that option to where you can go right to the planet. You don't have to stop playing. He did mention that, you know, there may be an update in the future if they can figure out something that makes more sense for the game. And obviously if someone decides to create a mod where they create that functionality, you can have it that way too. Todd goes a little bit deeper into the dialogue options. He does mention that this is not a voice protagonist, so it's not like what was in Fallout 4. It's more like what was in Skyrim and like the other Fallout games, like Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, where you have the person says a line of dialogue and then you have certain options that you can choose from. Now, what he's saying is actually they've just passed 250,000 lines of dialogue, whereas Fallout 4 and Skyrim combined didn't even have that much dialogue, which is absolutely wild. And you know, it should be that way, especially with how long they've been working on this game and how many people they have. Their team just is exponentially larger than it was for either of those games. In that dialogue conversation, that sounded weird, but yeah, in that dialogue conversation, he did talk about the Persuasion minigame. He kind of mentioned it's not really like a minigame. If you remember Oblivion, there was actually kind of like a weird like wheel thing that you interacted with, and the options you picked, if it was more like what the person liked, you could persuade them and like you get like a higher number of how much they liked you and they would trust you more. This is more like you get like a certain amount of points, probably per how good your like speechcraft or like, you know, whatever that skill's gonna be called in Starfield. You'd probably get more points to spend on the persuasion, or you'd be able to do better persuasion, so like good, better, best kind of options. In the video, it does show like a few tiers of options, so like +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of thing, where it uses more points per persuasion to kind of push that persuasion, which is really interesting because the way you described it is it sounded like it would be more like a continuation of dialogue instead of a separate minigame. So it would be like you were actually in real life trying to persuade someone to do something, which is totally awesome. Todd went on to mention traits in the game, and from what I've seen, it kind of reminds me of what's in like Fallout New Vegas, where you pick a trait and it gives you kind of like a pro and a con. So like in Fallout New Vegas, you had one that gave you better perception if you put glasses on. So glasses would be like a +1 perception, but this trait would give you +2 perception for glasses, but then like your limbs broke way more easily or something like that. So these are gotta get a pro and a con. And he said that they're gonna have some options where if you are playing as a character and you had already picked the traits which you picked at the very beginning, if you don't like those traits anymore and you don't want to have those traits, you want to pick new ones, you'll have a quest option that you can go through the quest and kind of resolve that trait. So like if you picked introvert, to where like you get extra points for not having companions, but you lose points in your skills for having companions. So you could do a quest that would kind of like make you not introverted anymore. I don't know if it would force you to pick another option, or if like if you removed introvert, if it made you pick extrovert instead, something like that. I'm not really sure, but it does seem like a really cool option. There's a new trait that's shown off in the video, like I mentioned before, called Hero Worshipped. Now, if you played Oblivion and you played through the kind of like arena where you battled monsters and things like in the Colosseum, you'll remember Adoring Fan.
Yes! Oh, great and mighty Grand Champion! Is there something you need? Can I carry your weapon? Shine your boots? Back rub, perhaps?
Now, Adoring Fan was just a huge fan of you from being in the Colosseum, and when you bump into him, he'd kind of follow you around, give you things, but he was super annoying. Now, I guess this is something that they're bringing back in Starfield, so I'll bring up Hero Worshipped on the screen here. It says, "You've earned the attention of an annoying, quote-unquote, adoring fan who will show up randomly and jabber at you incessantly. On the plus side, he will give you gifts." And yeah, that's about the same as what Adoring Fan was like in Oblivion. Hopefully not as annoying, but I think that would be an interesting trait to try out. I think the first character that I play as in Starfield, I'll pick Hero Worshipped as one of my traits. Now, I think Starfield was originally supposed to come out in November, I think November 11th of this year, but it unfortunately was delayed until sometime next year. I believe they said early 2023, which could really be kind of like anywhere between January and April, kind of the first quarter. I'm gonna wager that maybe March will be around the time that they're gonna release the game. I think they'll probably need a couple months into 2023 to have an official announcement, put an official date out there, make sure to get the game completely ready and out to retailers and everything. So they'll need some time. So I'm guessing probably March or April, but hopefully it won't be any further than that. Unfortunately, it's very possible that even though they said maybe early next year, it is very possible that it won't be released until November of next year. And hopefully we'll know soon. Starfield was a project that's been a long time in the making. And you know what was also a long time in the making? The Super Mario Bros. Movie. If you want to see a video about that, click on over here and I'll see you on the next one.